There's so many great gypsy jazz tunes, and if you play nylon string guitar, you absolutely should get into gypsy jazz. There's a lot of crossover there with Spanish guitar, I think. And in this video, I want to show you 5 classic gypsy jazz songs that I put together into one arrangement. I put them all in the key of A minor. I'm going to play it for you in a second, where we have 2 guitars and melody on top of the screen and rhythm on the bottom. And notice how I'm using the same chord shape for so much of these 5 songs. This is a shape that's so multi-purpose, and it can be different chords in different situations. Talk about that afterwards. But check out these 5 classic gypsy jazz tunes all melded together into one medley. You may have heard some of those songs before. Those are classic tunes. And I'm using for the melody my Pavan Flamenco Blanca, a little bit of a brighter sound. And those gypsy jazz guitars, of course, gypsy jazz is normally played on a steel string. They really have more of a high-pitched twanginess to them. So I think a Flamenco Blanca kind of fits that a little bit more for the melody. But of course, you can play any guitar that you want for this. I'm already breaking the rules and illegally playing gypsy jazz on a nylon string. If you want to get the fully notated tab to this, both the lead and the melody, and some play-along backing tracks, check out my Gypsy Jazz for Nylon String lesson collection at the link below. So the songs are Minor Swing. I chose that one to begin and end because Minor Swing, there really is no melody to it other than that intro and the outro. The main bulk of that song is a template for soloing over, so that's a perfect way to bookend this medley. So I did the intro to Minor Swing, played those 4 other tunes, and then ended with the way that Minor Swing ends. And I ended on this really wacky chord. We'll start talking about chords here with this last one. Really great, kind of James Bondy sounding. I couldn't resist doing that at the end. It does kind of, in a way, kind of undermine that ending. We want to hear the root of the scale, but we undercut it with this. The minor major 7th, but we also have a 6th in there, so we could call that a minor major 13th. Because when you're talking about a 7th chord, this what would have been 6 is now 13. That's part of our stacking of notes, those odd numbers. But throughout, we're going to be seeing this shape. That is the main shape. So if you are just getting into gypsy jazz, that you got to learn this one, and it's pretty easy to play. I mean, we don't have to bar anything, and I'm getting pretty, what we could say is sloppy in the left hand, just so that I can block strings that I don't want. So I'm playing the 5th fret of the 6th string, and I'm actively touching the 5th string so that I don't hear it. Although when we strike the strings, we get an extra percussive effect for that reason, because I'm blocking the string. Then I have F sharp here, that's on the 4th fret of the 4th string, and then I have C here. A minor 6, we can call that. We're missing the 5th. We could always take the 5th out. And if we're playing a 1-4-5 minor key progression, which is so common and happening throughout all these songs, we would have A minor, D minor is the 4, and then E or E7 is the 5. So I can take this A minor 6 and move it up here to the 10th fret as the root in the 9th position. There's D minor 6. Now for E7, I can do this. So we have E7, would look like this if we really want to have the root in there. That's the root, the 3rd, and a flat 7. But if we put the 5th in the bass, look, we get the same shape that we had before. And your ear fills in the gaps. We don't even need the root. We have that leading tone of G sharp. And that's such a handy way. I mean, so easy to play. And there's a lot of things that are hard in gypsy jazz, obviously. But we have this shape. We can use it for the entire song for minor swing. There's the 1, the 4, the 5, and then we're back to the 1. But also in this medley, we saw an A7 and a B7. And even a B flat 7 in Douce Ambiance. So I'm fingering that with my middle finger again, but instead of playing your index finger here, go up 1 fret, and then with your pinky play 1 fret above that. Same 3 strings. And the only other chord that's different that I played was a major 6th chord. So here's the minor 6 shape. So this would be C minor 6, because I'm on a C note, but make this minor 3rd a major 3rd, and that's C major 6. So we can get away with knowing just a couple of chord shapes for so many of these tunes. And that just shows you how resourceful this style of music can be, at least when it comes to the chords. I'm going to be showing some of the tab on the screen for this, but I'm always embellishing the melody, so it's not going to appear exactly as you see on the screen. Depending on where we are in the song, another kind of gypsy jazz element is to do a lot of little ornaments, hammer-ons and pull-offs really quick, going up and then back down to the note. That's always something you can do with the melody. Hopefully you know what the scale is underneath to make it sound more three-dimensional and alive, and just play it a little bit differently every time. So we started with minor swing, just that intro. All that is the 1-4-5 chord progression with the root 3rd and 5th of every chord. The root 3rd, 5th. I played it up here. It's an A minor triad. You could play it here if you want. And then D minor, but I played it over here so I could get this bend, while the other guitar, the rhythm guitar, played a harmony to that. So we have root, 3rd, 5th in the main guitar, and then in the rhythm guitar, the 5th and the root and the 3rd, but we're going to bend up into that final note for each case. So we go. See right there's a little thing not written in the music. It'll be written on the tab, that one will be on the screen, but I'm going a really quick hammer on the pull-off. Here I'm using my thumb, but throughout, for the most part, I was using picado technique, which is index and middle rest strokes. And that's a cool, what I would think of as an overlap between, let's say, Spanish nylon string guitar and gypsy jazz, is that they're really aggressive in doing rest strokes too. Like depending on how fast they're playing, they might take the pick and land on the next string, and that gives you a lot more volume and it gives you like an aggressive biting tone, especially on those really loud twangy guitars. So we can at least approximate that kind of by digging in really hard to the string here. I started though with my thumb and then moved into picado technique. Bend that up a half step, while the other guitar goes. A little harder to bend on nylon string guitar. I don't think it's really harder, but you have to bend more sometimes to get to the same result or the same note that you're shooting for, whereas steel string, I don't think you have to bend it as hard. All depends on the string tension and things like that. And then we have an E7 chord, and we just kind of sit there before we repeat it again. I played it here. That's just a little intro, so I didn't include that in my list of chords. And then we start with the rhythm there, which would be minor swing, going to the 1 chord, but there is where we jumped into swing Gitane. This is a great old tune, and it's all arpeggio based. I mean, as most songs will be. What's cool about Gypsy Jazz, at least for my brain, is that it's a lot simpler harmonically for the most part. It's not some, you know, crazy substitutions and all of this, like, you know, quantum physics of music theory stuff, which is also very cool. Pretty straightforward most of the time, at least the traditional old stuff. So we're going. That is an A minor chord, right over that A minor 6. And then we have. So what happens here, I love how this sounds. We have our 1 chord, and the 2 should have been, probably, in the natural minor or harmonic minor scale, B minor 7 flat 5. But instead of that, it's a B7. And you hear that quite a bit, that kind of thing. Girl from Ipanema does that. There's the 1 chord, the 2 should be a minor 7th, but we make it a dominant 7th. And so many songs, so many jazz songs do that. What I like about it, though, is the chord goes up, right from the 1st chord to the 2nd chord, but the melody goes down. And then it goes, so I love how one's going up and the other's going down. And then we have an E7, our real 5 chord. So this B7 is really the 5 of the 5. That's why it works. It's an unexpected chord, but then it goes to where your ear wanted it to go, to that 5 chord there. And then we have just playing notes from the chord and doing these lower neighbor things, which is such a Gypsy Jazz thing. Taking a note on the chord, and right? If we had an A minor chord, for example, this is a great little practice for you if you've never heard this before. These are just the notes from an A minor chord, and then you see this so often. Villalobos does that for an E minor chord in Etude number 1. These are all just notes from that triad. And then another unexpected thing happens in Swing Gitane. We change key here to B flat major 6. So earlier I said we have a C major 6. Same thing I was showing you earlier. Sometimes I like to put the 5th in there too. All we really need though is this. And so right there I'm thinking I'm playing in B Lydian because it fits for A minor to B flat. But do we have a triad here too? And instead of playing this note, we can bend into it. And then this chord, the end of it, we're back to B7 again, the 5 of the 5. Played octaves for that final ending. So from there we go to Joseph, Joseph, and all the usual suspects in terms of chords. But let's talk a little bit about how to play that rhythm. There's all kinds of ways to do it. Of course, if you're a traditional Gypsy Jazz player on a steel string with a pick, you really are stuck with that pick. But I think it's cool that as nylon string players, fingerstyle players, we can use different fingers at different times. So what I was doing there is actually making kind of a mock pick kind of position with my hand, as if I had a pick between these 2 fingers, and I'm going. So I'm exclusively hitting it with the nail of my index finger, not even that hard, and then relaxing between every stroke, giving it a little bit more of a push on the 2 and the 4, which is kind of like a rock backbeat. Another way to do that might be to take your middle and ring finger, which that's a very flamenco thing to do. Get a lot more volume with that. You can do it that way. And every once in a while, throw an upstroke with your thumb in there. And we're swinging. All these songs are a shuffle, so when we go up, it needs to be a little bit later than you think. Or you could play your thumb on that low string and any other finger down afterwards and toggle between those 2. A lot of ways to do it. And then also we have rasgueos and things like that we can do in between the cracks. So a lot of options for us, but for that video that you saw, I just pretty much stuck to this. They call that the le pompe rhythm. For Joseph, Joseph, the pickup notes to that really begins it are the same notes that the rhythm played for minor swing. We had, right? For Joseph, Joseph, we have, and that's nothing but the notes, an arpeggio starting on the 5th of an A minor chord. Notice here with my thumb, a lot of strings are going to ring out, especially when you play this type of thing. So I'm taking the side of my thumb and killing it whenever I can, whenever I hear that those are ringing out and I don't want them. Here's one of those little embellishments that's kind of written into the melody. Going a really quick pull off and then slide it down. Some good chromaticism in there. Same thing again. Now we have an A7 chord, but we don't have to bar it, right? We can play it this way like we did before. And that's going to D minor, super common. That's the 5 of the 4 chord. And it's reflected in the melody. Straight up triad again. See, I didn't write that on the page, but why not do that? Now for this part, there's a flat 5 right there. That's the blues scale happening. So a lot of these songs, or almost all of them, or actually every single one of them, is using the harmonic minor scale. And in this case, in this key, throughout we're in the key of A minor. E7 is the chord where the harmonic minor scale like manifests itself. But if we also add the note from the blues scale, we get the Hungarian minor scale. And this is why I went to swing 48 and put swing 48 here, because it almost sounds just like it. So that's coming up in a second. But that ending phrase, such a bluesy phrase. And then we go to swing 48, which is for the most part that 1-4-5 progression. And I think if I had to choose what's the easiest melody, but really like a true gypsy jazz traditional standard, it would be swing 48, because there's not a lot going on in the melody. You got to be able to play those notes back and forth kind of quickly. We're shuffling, right? See, there's that flat 5, which we had in Joseph, Joseph. So those kind of like melded right into each other there with that phrase. Very interesting thing that happens at the end though. Now here's our 5 chord, E7. We can go up 1 fret for F7. That's actually in the key, except for the fact that it's a dominant 7. We would have F major. Think of the Andalusian cadence. A minor, G, F, and E. So there's your F. You can make this chord a dominant 7. Why does that work? Because it has the same tritone as the 5 of the 5. Remember B7 earlier in Swing Gitane? Yeah, but we don't have to get too complicated with it, but thinking about that stuff. I know some of you like to hear the theory stuff, and others of you don't like it at all. F7 to E7. Now these chords where I said we can take a dominant 7th chord, put the 5th in the bass, we should write it with a slash just to be thorough and complete. This would be F7. This is F7 over C, but there's no root. The root is gone. And then to there. The ending though to Swing 48 is pretty cool and weird. To G sharp, which is unexpected. And that's how I ended this whole melody, right on that chord. A minor major 7. Can always put a 6 in there. Little embellishment there if we like. And then I played a little bit more of that chord since there was some free time there. And from there we went into Douce Ambiance. This one's a great one. It starts with those slides. Normally this is in G minor, as is Swing Gitane. Normally you'll see that. So we're going. But since this is an E note, I like to toggle against the open E string. So you could go, but it's better, I think, on the last note of that phrase to not let it be an open string so that you can give it some vibrato if you like. Another gypsy jazz thing where they're vibrato like crazy. There's our flat 5. Now we have a B flat 7 here. It's kind of weird that we can, in Swing Gitane, play a B7 before E7, but we also can play B flat 7 before E7. The reason that B7 works, that's the 5 of the 5, so B7 wants to resolve up a 4th to E, major or minor. But we also can take the tritone that's already in E7 and play B flat 7. So one of them pushes to the other, and the other one is a substitute for that chord, and you can play both of them. B flat 7 and then to E7. It's like 2 ways of doing the same thing, you could say. And this little closing phrase is so nice. Then we're back to we're going to end with, that's the A section of it. Then I love this part too, the B section. It takes that A minor 6 chord. You can also play it this way. If you're able to bend backwards at your ring finger, just flop it over. If it's a minor 6 chord though, if we're doing this thing where it's an inversion of the dominant 7th, you can't do that. Unless you were in a major key. You can do whatever you want, right? But typically we want it to sound more minor. Okay, so we're going up 1 fret, make it B flat minor 6, and then it's going to go up to B minor 6. And the melody here is just a straight up Dorian scale, which a minor 6 chord implies. Then we go up a fret, and it looks like the same thing's going to happen again on B minor 6. But then it goes. That's such a cool little element to that song, which a lot of these other songs you're just whacking away at the chords all the way through. But this one has this nice little break in it, really cool. So we take that shape up here. These are all dominant 7th chords. We're going to go G and just go down to E7, but we're going to get to E7 by going underneath it and back. So let me play just the normal way of playing these chords with the root. We have G7, G flat 7, F7, and then go down a fret. This is like that enclosure or the lower neighbor thing. That's a D sharp 7 going up to E7. It's easy to play. And now put this in the bass. The other benefit of putting the 5th in the bass is now we have control over the 6th string. We can just whack away at all the strings there, and it's just easier to do, and it sounds totally great. And the melody here, I was playing octaves, and that's one thing that we can do as nylon string guitarists, and it is totally a thing that Django did, playing octaves. And we can block all the other strings that we don't want by relaxing these fingers. Make sure we, so watch, I'm gonna play every string. This muted, muted, not muted. It's a real delicate millimeter, micro millimeter thing that's happening there. Block, block, don't block, block it, don't block it, block it. And then we can whack all the strings. And then we're back to the main melody. Now, a lot of these songs are gonna end with a tag ending. So the ending of Douce Ambiance should go and repeat that again. Maybe even another time. And we have a typical ending, which we can do on any of these songs at the end, even in a major key. But from here, instead of doing that, I went straight to the outro for minor swing, which is very much like the intro, but no string bending. D minor triad, I slid into that one, I think, in the video. Then we have our E chord. A little kind of turnaround here. Now the Gypsy Jazz ending, I have a whole video on that, is pretty easy to do. There's different ways to do it. You could do it all on one string. Take a minor chord or a major chord, find the 5th and go down a half step and just walk up fret by fret. But I'm doing it this way. Getting that half step right here with my pinky. Going out of position, and then land on the root of the chord. And then we can play that cool minor major 7th. You can get the full tab of this, the chords and the melody, and some play-along scrolling tab videos at different tempos to help you along in my Gypsy Jazz for Nylon String lesson collection. You can find that link below. Now, as nylon string guitarists, there's a lot of Gypsy Jazz stuff that we can do. We might even have some advantages, or some things might be easier for us because we can use more fingers. And check out this video where I run through different rhythms and different techniques, a bunch of great licks and strategies you can use as a nylon string guitarist to play all kinds of Gypsy Jazz.